Countries also wondering if they can strike a deal about tariffs with U.S. President Donald Trump on the sidelines. Kellyanne Shaw was an advisor, also the Sherpa for the U.S. at a previous G7 meeting and one of Donald Trump's senior trade advisors during his first administration. And she joins me from Washington this morning. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Maybe I'll just start on the Middle East and whether you think that runs the risk of overshadowing this summit at all, Kellyanne Shaw.
Yeah, I mean, certainly this is going to be on the minds of G7 leaders as they gather tonight in Alberta. I mean, the thing about the G7, which is different from other international organizations, is that the agenda is actually quite fluid. There are these formal meetings where leaders meet to discuss predetermined topics, but there are also these dinners on the side, bilateral meetings, discussions that happen on the margins, and it really is a forum for leaders to discuss the most pressing news happening in the world, and this is going to be number one on the agenda.
One of the things there that you said, there are predetermined issues to talk about. One of the things that Canada decided not to push this year was trying to build consensus around a final communique. I just wonder whether you think that what that tells you about how much consensus there will be around that table.
Yeah, well, I was always of the view that some of these long communiques, like 36 pages of platitudes and empty promises, don't really do much in terms of advancing the global agenda. And so actually the approach that Prime Minister Carney is taking in terms of having a chair summary and then targeted leader-specific statements on certain issues, I actually think is the right way forward. But it does show exactly what he's trying to achieve, which is consensus. And there's certainly differences between a number of the G7 members. So why stress the differences instead of trying to build on consensus where there is a significant amount of overlap on issues like economics and foreign policy?
There are lots of new people around this table, not just Canada's Prime Minister, but others, the German Chancellor, for instance. And Donald Trump has done this before and also takes up a lot of space in these kinds of events. I wonder how he will be in that room, given that there's some sort of quote-unquote newbies, and he also would have his own agenda there.
Yeah, I mean, with President Trump, what you see is what you get. He is exactly the same in public as he is behind closed doors in some of these leader level meetings. And I was there back in 2019 during the G7 in France and was there for some of these private conversations. And I actually think it's positive that you have a new crop of faces among G7 leaders. And the Chancellor was just in Washington. He's got a good relationship with Prime Minister Starmer. He's got a good relationship with Ursula von der Leyen as well as Meloni. So I do think that in terms of how the leaders interact, that will be positive, even where there may be substantive differences. That personal relationship is going to matter.
I'm going to tap into your other part of your role, which was trade. Canada is trying to negotiate a deal with the U.S. We've been told not to necessarily expect one coming out of the G7, but I would imagine every leader who is dealing with tariffs will try and plead their case to the president. Would you expect any movement from anyone or any nation on this coming out of this summit?
Yeah, I certainly think that Canada is very high on the list. Mexico, so Prime Minister Sheinbaum, who I believe is going to be up there as well, is also up there just because of the importance of the North American market. But we've heard that countries like Japan are close to a potential deal. The UK has this other additional commitments that it's negotiating. Even though it got the first deal, it needs to continue to elaborate on those commitments, especially for steel. So it's possible we might hear some announcements, but certainly any deal that works is win-win. So it's going to be to the benefit of the United States, but also to Canada or any other country that's asking. So I'm hopeful that if not this weekend, in the short term, we might see some more deals announced.
And just finally, there is this expanded guest list that will happen on Tuesday, including President Zelensky, Australia, Brazil, India. What do you make of those particular invites and what might come out of that, whether it be on Ukraine or sort of expanded global trade?
Yeah, and this is really the prerogative of whoever holds the presidency, what other countries to invite. And every year, additional countries come to the table and meet the G7 leaders. And I think what it shows are some of Prime Minister Carney's priorities. Certainly, India is the world's largest democracy. It's a huge market. It's really important in terms of consensus building on some of these economic security issues. Brazil coming to the table, having Zelensky there shows, of course, what we thought was going to be the number number one priority of the security meeting, which was Russia, Ukraine, now potentially overshadowed by Israel and Iran. But I do think that it shows mostly the priorities of Canada, but also issues where Canada is trying to build consensus among like-minded allies.
Kellyanne Shaw, super smart. I hope you'll come back on this program. Thank you for making time for us this morning.
Happy to. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. U.S. President Donald Trump will arrive in Canada later today and, of course, amidst another trade battle. Let's bring in our Sunday Scrum. Louis Blouin is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for Radio-Canada. He is in beautiful Banff for the summit. Jason Markusoff, a producer and writer for CBC News in Calgary. And Robert Benzie is the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. He's, of course, in Toronto. Nice to see you all, gentlemen. Appreciate you doing this. Louis, particularly, Louis and Jason, you got up a little earlier than Rob and I. Louis, you reported this week that there is some progress being made, which I think everyone agrees on. But it's hard to know what that actually means, given who we're dealing with here. Do you have the sense, given what has been exchanged, that we might see something come out of the summit, particularly between Canada and the U.S.?
The signals I'm getting, Rosemary, is that, we're not there yet. And we've asked our sources in the last few hours, and they say that they don't feel that the finish line might be on Monday with this meeting with Donald Trump. There's still some work to do, we're being told. There was some concrete things that happened in the last few weeks. There's a document, an actual document with maybe the frame of an agreement that, circulated between the White House and the office of Prime Minister Carney. So that was all very encouraging. Canada is ready to commit to that golden dome that is very dear to the heart of Donald Trump. So, there were some positive signs that Canada was ready to do its part. But we're told that it might not happen at this summit. And we'll see, if something happens, it will be between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Carney in that one-on-one meeting. We're told that if there's an agreement to be made, it's going to be between the two, and that the vibes are good between the two, but are they ready to land this deal, especially with what is happening in the Middle East? President Trump might have, other priorities on his list.
Yeah, Rob, I think that is a concern, right? That there's so much going on right now, and domestically, the president's preoccupied as well. So whether whether he's coming here with any of those goals with any country, because there'll be other countries who will want to try and get a bilat to talk about tariffs with him too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're the host, and Prime Minister Carney is the shiny new member. So I think Mr. Trump seems to have a rapport with him that he certainly did not have with Mr. Carney's predecessor, Justin Trudeau, who, remember, was the host of the 2018 G7 that did not go well. Remember, after Trump left, he was reading about what Trudeau was saying in Charleroi, and it did not go over very well. Let's just say. Fast forward, all these years later, and we're in an interesting time. Let's just say, in the United States, Mr. Trump faced huge protests across, Houston, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, New York yesterday against his No Kings. These protests were called against his birthday parade in Washington, where he had military tanks and missiles and stuff going by him in a very, very un-American kind of a scene. It was more like something you'd see in North Korea or Moscow, except that the crowds weren't very big. So I think that he may be licking his wounds from that. You also have the political assassination in Minnesota yesterday. So that's got to be top of mind for him as a challenge. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, to say nothing of Israel's sort of hot war with Iran right now. So the Canada's tariffs look like a solvable problem for Mr. Trump.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's maybe a good point here, Jason. Like, if there are some wins that the president could get, whether it be with Canada, someone else, or some sort of, looking united at the G7 table, that might be appealing to Donald Trump, given all the other things that he's dealing with right now.
And well, yes, he's created this desperation level on countries like Canada. I mean, you heard Butch Mandel earlier talking about how desperate those industries are for relief on the steel and aluminum tariffs. But Trump has also sort of superimposed upon all this his own little target of wanting to get all these deals done by July 4th. And certainly a canny operator like Mark Carney and the others around the table will know that he is keen to make deals, keen to show success. The other thing that we saw this week that was kind of quiet, much quieter, was that we saw Trump for almost the first time, really, realized that some of his hardline policies are causing his businesses grief. He has ordered a slowdown or stop to the ICE raids, the Immigration Customs Enforcement raids, on farms, on other industries, because he knows that those industries rely on immigrant labor. So, certainly those same pressures have been coming to bear on the companies that are paying for the import tariffs or having to scramble to find alternatives to Canadian steel and aluminum. So that these are all things that are going to work in Carney's factor. He doesn't necessarily have to, have a deal by this deadline of this G7, but he's able to leverage all these factors that are weighing on Trump by his own self-inflicted wounds.
Yeah, and I should be clear, the Prime Minister keeps saying, we'll do it in our own time. We're not in any rush to get the deal. We'll get it when we get it. The former Prime Minister, Jean Chrétien, was out in Alberta. I think he was in Alberta. Yeah, he was talking about these kinds of things. And he was saying, Louis, that leaders should ignore Trump's outbursts. Easier said than done when you've got that kind of character around a table. And I've been told that in these private meetings, Trump does like to talk. He's very involved. He likes to weigh in on things. How do you think that the dynamics of that will unfold?
I think Mark Carney wants to avoid the Charlevoix scenario. I covered a few G7 summits with Donald Trump, Rosemary, and the image that comes to mind is The Price is Right. I see this big wheel turning and you don't know where it's going to land. And, we'll see this time around. And I think they will try to keep him involved. I think the fact that Mark Carney wanted to make of this an economic summit. He wants to maybe keep the most hot issues on the side and, go and try to work on very consensual things like critical mineral, artificial intelligence. And he wants to, and he played it down. And he already said that he doesn't want a final communique out of this summit. He's playing it down and trying to just keep the group together. Try not to have this big blowout like we've seen in Charlevoix. If he can do that, honestly, his objective as the host of the summit would be accomplished, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's all very pragmatic, right, Rob? Like a no final communique, because you can't get a consensus really on a bunch of issues, is a good way to handle the president.
Yeah, I think Mark Carney has some experience in these types of meetings. I mean, Louis and I were in Saskatoon 2 weeks ago when the premiers had a First Minister's meeting with the Prime Minister, and we watched Carney make a lot of premiers from across the political spectrum, including Danielle Smith in Alberta, quite happy. And that's not an easy thing to do. But I think he has an artfulness about him, and he's certainly enjoying a honeymoon, a political honeymoon, but also a practical honeymoon in the sense that he understands that he has an interesting moment in which he can get the premiers on side, and if he can get other world leaders on side, Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, is an ally. Anthony Albanese coming from Australia, not a member of the G7, but Albanese and Carney have a good rapport, and not just because Albanese or Carney intervened to allow Vegemite to be sold in Canada during the Australian election, which was a big deal in Australia, not such a big deal here in Canada. But it's those kind of relationships that speak to a kind of understanding that there's a way to work together, find common ground. And I think if Carney can find common ground, to Louis' point, with Trump, then this is this will be a successful summit.
Can they make sure that Trump doesn't take all the oxygen out of the room, Jason?
Good luck with that. I mean, the reality is it's an entirely different G7 because it is Trump. I mean, we think a lot about the how he ripped up the communique and trashed Trudeau on his way on it, flying out to see Kim Jong-un last time. Let's also remember some of the dramatics that happened inside the room that came out reported later. He talked about sending thousands of Mexicans to Japan in private conversations to show how Japan would feel about illegal immigrants. I mean, he just is a firebrand. They know what to expect, which is why they're tamping down expectations for any broad consensus. They're almost suspending the rules of a typical G7 because it is Trump. But Carney and everybody else knows this. Carney is also, he has a great rapport with Emmanuel Macron and already built one with Keir Starmer. He's worked on that defense deal in Australia. He's already talking about Rearm Europe. So he has been able to, every single meeting so far he seems to have had, he's been able to leverage something and come up with not only okay, but also affable things. And let's also not forget, this week he got one big chip off Canada's shoulder, and that is by committing to the 2% NATO target before it's long blasted away by the next target.
That's a beautiful segue for next hour, where we were going to talk more about what this summit tells us about this government's foreign policy. Rob, Louis, Jason, thank you. Go grab a coffee. We'll talk in a little bit. Thanks, guys.